And finally here, the fun stuff. Program the robot to move from point A to point D and pick up a plastic bottle. How far does it travel from A to D? So we know that's our value x. I see a right triangle with an altitude to the hypotenuse, which means I have an altitude. I have leg 1, segment 1, leg 2, segment 2, and the entire thing here is a hypotenuse. So what are we trying to find? We are trying to find segment 2. Which of our equations uses segment 2? Well, it could be the altitude equation. Do we have the altitude? No. It could also be the leg 2 equation. So I vote we use the leg 2 equation. What does that one say? It says the entire hypotenuse over our leg 2. Leg 2 is the means over segment 2. Well, what is the length of our entire hypotenuse? This piece is 9 and this piece is x. You are going to want to say 9 times x. That is not and will never be true. If I said this piece was 9 and this piece was 10, you would tell me, oh, that's 19. Because how do you get that? You have to add them. So our hypotenuse is x plus 9 long. Leg 2 is 20 long and segment 2 is x long. So when we cross multiply, we get x times x plus 9 equals 20 times 20. Now, how do we deal with an x squared? Y'all remember how to factor? Hopefully in algebra, you learned how to factor. We need to put this in standard form, which means it has to equal 0. So we subtract 400 from each side. We get x squared plus 9x minus 400 equals 0. And then we factor it. We unfoil. You know, foil is we distribute, right? Factoring is unfoiling. I want to erase. Eraser. There we go. Sorry about that. How do you factor? Well, you factor your first term. How do we make x squared? X times x. How do we make a negative 400? Well, there's a lot of options. Negative 1 times positive 400. Positive 1 times negative 400. And then we use those to make a plus 9x. So I'm guessing that 1 times 400 and 2 times 200 and 4 times 100 are not going to work, right? So look here, we get a negative 16 times a positive 25. We also could have had a positive 16 times a negative 25. Both of those, if you add them together, multiply them makes negative 400. If we add them, they're both going to make some version of 9. We need a positive 9. This one makes a plus 9. This one makes a negative 9. So we want the one that makes a plus 9. So x minus 16, x plus 25. You set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So x equals 16 or x equals negative 25. No, you can't have that. No negative distance. So x has to equal 16. There is also an option in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That is standard form, we have the quadratic formula, which always, always, always works. Sometimes it's easy to factor. Quadratic formula always works. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You recognize that? I hope so. This plus or minus here makes it two equations. That's where we get our two answers. A quadratic, x squared, a quadratic will always have two solutions because you are square rooting. Square roots always have two solutions, a positive and a negative. Square root of 9 is 3 and negative 3. So our first equation would be the opposite of b plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. And our second equation would be the opposite of b minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Quadratic formula always works. If you've learned how to factor, and we'll talk more about this in class some, if you've learned how to factor, your life is better off. From point D, the robot must turn right. Let's go ahead and do this last problem. I'll just do it with you. We want to know how far does the robot travel from D to B. That's an altitude. So we know the altitude is the geometric mean of segment 1 and segment 2. So how does that come out? What's segment 1? 9 over, we don't know our altitude. Don't know our altitude. And what's the length of segment 2? We just found that, 16. So a squared, that's 9 times 16. Oh, that's nice, 144. Anybody know why that's nice? 144 is a perfect square. 12 times 12. Or negative 12 times negative 12. Square root of 144 is actually 12 or negative 12. But negative numbers don't work for distance. So this is 12. We found this was 16. So it has to travel 12 inches. Oops, erased a little too much. 12 inches. This was 16 inches. All right. Those are a little bit longer problems, but hey, told you many times, math doesn't get any easier. You can do these as long as you work carefully. Label everything, write your formulas, substitute in. I believe in you. So go ahead and have fun with your homework.